Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where real conversations fuel real business growth. I'm Kelly Sundsvold, co-hosting with my partner in business and life, Shawn Sundsvold. Today's guest is someone who knows exactly how to turn conversation into conversion, Matt Nettleton. He's a seasoned sales trainer, keynote speaker, and host of the Default Profitable podcast. As president of Sandler DTB, Matt has helped close more than $3.2 billion in new revenue across industries like SaaS, staffing, agriculture, and entertainment. But what makes Matt stand out isn't just the numbers, it's his passion for building repeatable systems, empowering entrepreneurs, and reshaping how we think about sales. So whether you're just starting a business or scaling something big, get ready to take notes. This will be a good conversation. I think you'll want to replay. So welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to the reverse visit.
Yes, I was just on your podcast a few weeks ago, so I'm excited to, dive into that one. So let's start with big picture stuff. What is Sandler TDB and what do you do?
So Sandler is it's the largest sales training organization in the world. I own the downtown Indianapolis office, and we work with businesses, from one-person companies, individuals that are high producing, all the way through really big corporations where I've done sales training for companies like Salesforce and Toast and, really big tech companies. And we work with, traditional companies too, a lot of HVAC contractors. But basically, we help them figure out how to take customer or prospect interest and turn it into revenue. And at the end of every session that we train, we put up a little form and we have everybody fill it out, what'd you learn? And then the final question is, can you give us a dollar value for a sale that you've made using something you learned in class? And we do that at the end of every class. You threw out that $3.2 billion number. Over the last 20 years, people have reported that they've made $3.2 billion in sales based on things that they've learned in Sandler training that I've delivered.
That's amazing.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I'm curious, just kind of thinking about you and career and, this is my first conversation with you, so I get to learn a little bit here. I'm going to guess sales kind of came naturally to you.
It did, actually. I got into sales by accident. I responded to a one ad that said, limited effort, good money, which was my love language. I was in high school, or I was in college. I had just had so I'd always worked as an orderly in a hospital or loaded trucks, doing things where I'm, 6'2", played football. They basically hired me to lift and move heavy things. That was my role in life. I ruptured all the ligaments and tendons in my thumbs, and I couldn't lift anything over 20 pounds.
Oh, wow.
So I had to get a job that did not involve doing the only thing that I really knew how to do. And so I ended up selling vacuum cleaners door to door and did well and won a scholarship as the best salesperson in 3 states, which essentially ended my academic career and kind of pointed me down the path of, oh yeah, you're going to be in sales for a living.
Okay. So going that route, what led you from being a salesperson, right? What led you and kind of got you to the point of doing sales training and, and from there, how did DTB kind of grow for you?
So, when I got out of school, I went to work for a large soft drink company based in Atlanta that most people are familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
So Coca-Cola, they would put us through sales training. Now, at that time, we were the number one consumer brand in the world, and we're still pretty far up there. We had a 95% plus market share, but they thought it was important enough that we should go through sales training. In fact, we went through, in my 6 years there, I think I went through 8 total sessions with 7 different training companies. When I left, I got into residential real estate because while I was with Coke, I met my wife at a bar in Indianapolis, and Coke made me an offer. I could move to Chicago or Detroit. And I said, you know what? I'm not sure if I like random gunplay or really bad traffic more, but I'm just going to stay in Indy. Right. Mm-hmm. So I stayed in Indy and I went to sell houses. I did not realize, I figured it'd be easy, right? Everyone lives indoors. How hard can this be? I did not realize that the average Indianapolis realtor makes $13,000 a year gross.
Wow. Ooh.
So I started that and I looked around, and what I realized is the most successful agents all attended sales training. Now, that's a small minority, right? About 10% of the market actually uses sales training. So I talked to a guy and he really helped me. And then I talked to somebody else. Well, I was 2% in the world, but I was working 80 or 90 hours a week. I mean, nights. If you're good at residential real estate, you just assume that's the way it is. And so we got married. My first baby was on the way. And I'm like, I can't work like this and have my kid know my name. Like that would kind of important that my kid knows my name. So I was looking for something and I responded to an ad for Sandler training, went in, became a client. My goal was to make the same amount of money and work half as much. So I'm top 2% in the world for Century 21. I'm looking around. I'm working too much. I answer an ad for Sandler. I become a client. My goal was to make the same amount of money, but work half as much. It was not to sell more. And I screwed it up. I worked half as much, but I made $1,000 more over the next 12 months. So I did that 2 more years. And then I was bored with real estate. And the guy that was my Sandler trainer said, hey, you really seem to understand the system. Why don't you do this for a living? And so I went to work for him and fell in love with the idea of getting to help, basically, 80% of our business is locally owned businesses, locally based salespeople. And I got to help locally based salespeople really change their lives by growing their revenue.
That's fantastic. It's as a salesperson most of my life, right? I've sat through sales training, some not great, some are fantastic, but I it's always interesting that salespeople, they always kind of stay in the sales world, right? And they just get better and they get better. And I love that you kind of took that and went to train others. What's been the biggest lesson you try to teach people who are in sales?
Well, the biggest lesson that I try to teach people who are in sales is that their primary job is prospecting, right? And it's funny. So on my podcast, one of my old clients, Lorraine Ball, she said, you're never in the business that you think you're in. You're simply a prospector for the business that you think you're in. Because until you sell it, you're not in that business. So you want to be in marketing? Great. Go sell marketing services. You want to be in trucking? Great. Go sell trucking services. Once you sell it, then you can be in the business. But to start, you've got to sell it. And so I will tell you, the number one thing that every salesperson hates is prospecting. So it's kind of a two-edged sword, right? Everybody's actually in it. Nobody wants to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So like on that, what's one of the biggest sales mistake you see businesses making, especially when it comes to prospecting?
So we refer to this as the magic money box, right? Pick it up, it'll make you money.
Mm-hmm.
The number of people who believe that they can do a million different things and never pick up the phone and actually grow their business is astonishing.
Yeah.
And listen, this is not, I think you have to do Google ads. I think you have to sponsor stuff on LinkedIn. I think you have to work with Facebook or Instagram based on your industry. I've got a direct mail campaign that I run, and I've run for 7 years. I've done direct mails, but in the end, cold calling, picking up the phone and dialing it, no matter how much everybody hates it, is going to play a role in growing your business.
Yeah.
Man.
I think phone skills, right? Just basic phone skills are such, and I'm going to poke a little bit at generational here, but the younger generation, they sometimes struggle with that. Not everybody, but many of them do. And if they can do it over text versus, do it over the phone or any face-to-face conversation, I think they would, right? But for me, like one of my first sales jobs was face-to-face selling cell phones inside of Sam's Club, right? You had to learn really, really quickly whether or not, how to engage that person, how to get them in conversation, and how to, read them in the first 5 seconds of a conversation of where you're going to go, right? Yeah. So it's vastly important, important.
So I've got 2 kids who are out of college and one who's a senior in high school. But my now 25-year-old daughter, when she was 17, we were driving somewhere and she was in the backseat with her brother. And I don't know where her younger sister was, but my wife was in the front seat. And we were driving and all of a sudden my phone dinged. And I looked down and my daughter had texted me from the backseat of our car. And I said, hey, Grace, we're in the same car. You're actually allowed to talk to me. And she said, just read the text. Look, that was a perfect, I'm driving. I'm not reading the text. Like it's,
right.
Like you're going to have to talk to me if you want me to do something.
Yeah.
So that is like the number one thing that business owners tell me about their employees under 30 is that they're exceptionally gifted digitally and exceptionally stunted in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting as even the next generation comes up, Gen Alpha, which I think they're kind of dubbing as the iPad generation.
Yeah.
So Kind of shifting gears a little bit, what is entrepreneurship? Because you're an entrepreneur at heart. What has it taught you about resilience that you didn't expect kind of when you started?
So that's actually a good question. And to some degree, that's why I started my podcast, because I work with these people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But entrepreneurship is how people who are unemployable find a way to pay for groceries.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah,
would
at
be
its
my
basic
best,
level, it is.
yeah, at my most basic explanation.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
So as a long-term, you've been a long-term sales leader, right? You've led in sales in companies. You're now leading a sales organization to train other people. What is a leadership lesson that you had to learn the hard way, right? And how did it shape you going forward as you continue to lead your own company?
So one of my favorite leadership lessons, it came early on when I got promoted to running a group of people. And one of my old bosses called me up and he said, "Hey, listen, you haven't asked me for advice. Are you okay if I give you some?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, remember when you first started working for me and you would go out with your buddies and you would complain about me?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, now everybody that reports to you is complaining about you to their buddies. So you better make sure that what you're doing intentionally."
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's probably the thing. So many leaders that I deal with, they go out and they do what they thought was done to them without thinking about why it was done.
Yeah.
Right. So you're going to get people complain about it. You better be able to say, "Well, wait a minute, I understand you're upset, but let me tell you why I did that." And you better have some basic grounding beyond, "I did it because that's the way it was done when I started."
Yeah. Yeah. It's like they experienced that. That's the way they were led. And so they just kind of regurgitate that rather than going, you know what, I really didn't like it when I was blank, maybe micromanaged or something. And how do I do this better?
Or even, and this is the one that kills me, is when I'll say, "Well, why do you have this meeting with your people each week?" And they're like, "Because we've always had this meeting on Wednesdays." I'm like, "Okay,
Oof.
I appreciate that, but help me understand at the end of this meeting, if it goes well, what has improved?" And they're like, "No, this is just a check-in meeting." I'm like, no, you got to do better than that.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't have a purpose, don't do it. But
Yeah.
that's the unthinking. It was this way when I got here. It'll be this way when I leave. I'm just going to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
The comments of, "We've always done it this way."
Most dangerous phrase in business.
Mm-hmm.
It is. So many of our listeners that we have are small business owners. That's part of the reason why we started this podcast. What would you say to someone trying to build a sales culture without a dedicated sales team? I'm talking about like the solopreneurs or maybe like the people that have a very, very small team.
Yeah. A lot of our clients are one-person companies, pest controls, financial planners, accountants, CPAs, attorneys, bookkeepers. I mean, there are a lot of people, even electricians, plumbers, and HVAC companies. You can build a sales team and you can have sales with any size team, but you have to be intentional about it, right? You can't be all things to all people. And so probably the most important thing a business owner can figure out is what is just an unconditional and not even a moment in doubt no. Like, yeah, no, that's not what we do. Like, this is what I do. This is not what I do. And you're going to get one of the struggles of being a business owner is you're going to get some great opportunities that will absolutely destroy your company if you accept them. And being able to predict that before you actually accept them and screw it all up is super important.
Yeah. And I'm curious, one of the things I think is whether they've, at least for me, sometimes in my own career, and I'm sure other people share it, is we hate the title of salesperson, right? Like we hate sort of having that title, wearing that hat, whatever it is. How do you, especially when it's, their CEO, their salesperson, their whatever, how do you help them kind of work through that in that moment to realize like, it not only has to be a part of your business, but you really do need to be good at it if you're going to grow.
So it's funny, inside Sandler, right? There's 400 offices around the world. We've done this since the 80s. There's a concept that we refer to as Horus. And Horus is all the other salespeople that have called on your prospects beforehand that have kind of ruined everything because nobody shows up as a salesperson saying, "I'm going to overpromise, I'm going to underdeliver, I'm going to be a little unethical, I'm probably going to overcharge. I'm not actually going to explain what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to complain when they get mad that I didn't do it." Nobody does that, but we wear it like it's our fault, right? We wear it like, listen, I don't want to be in sales because if I'm in sales, I'm Horus. And the reality is, well, you can be in sales and not be Horus. And you also don't have to internalize the idea that everybody who is in sales is Horus. So if I can get them to understand that it's okay to be disarmingly honest on a sales call. In fact, we recommend that as your number one strategy is, tell people exactly what you're going to do it, and remind them that you did what you said you were going to do. And if you can do those things, you're probably going to do okay. And the stigma of selling, as we refer to it, is probably something you'll learn to handle.
Nice. Yeah. I think that's really important. And, kind of taking that a little bit further into some of the things you're doing now, you titled your podcast Default Profitable, right?
Yes.
I think it's a really powerful idea. It's a powerful mental concept. What does that phrase mean to you, and why is it so important for business owners?
So a little bit about that title. I work with I've worked with 5 different accelerators. So people that take investors' money, put it together, and then bring startups in and get them trained for, 10-week periods or, different periods where they kind of immerse in growing the business. And so with that ecosystem, I end up talking to a lot of early stage seed type founders who are, kind of just getting their business idea put together, trying to package it. And one of the questions I like to ask is, tell me your business plan, right? What's your business plan? And probably 2 or 3 times a year, I hear, well, we're going to put together some software, then we're going to get an investor. And we're going to lose the first investor's money, and then we're going to get a bigger investor. And then we're going to lose the second investor's money, and we're going to get a third investor. And when we lose by the time we lose the third investor's money, we're going to sell the company, we're all going to get rich. And I'm like, that's not a business plan.
No.
I mean, listen, there are companies that actually do multiple rounds of fundraising and that sell at the end without ever turning a profit. But your company probably isn't one, right?
Mhm.
And so, tech companies are probably a third of my business, but the other 2/3 are people that, HVAC, electrical, plumber, people that do real things with their hands. And those guys understand that in order to start and grow a business, you have to make more money this week than you spend. And every Friday, by default, you're either profitable or out of business. And so, those are the guys that nobody talks about, and nobody ever says, man, I wonder how this guy who started the HVAC company that's sponsoring my Little League team got into business.
Mhm.
And what does he know about running a business? I mean, he's been doing it for 35 years. Maybe we should ask him. And so that was really the focus of the podcast when I started was, interviewing a bunch of clients who, whether it was a marketing company, a trucking company, logistics services company. I had one of my past clients who left the insurance world to sell lasagnas during COVID and has started a super successful Send a Friend lasagna. So you get all these people, but the one thing they all have in common is they had to come up with a way to pay bills every Friday. And by default, they had to make more money in those 5 days before they spent Friday evening.
Yeah.
I love that title. Man, that's really appreciate you going into all of that as far as like just the explanation. But I think a lot of people don't go into business thinking about it that way, right? They think they're going to go into business. They think it'll be default profitable, right? Because they have the biggest belief in themselves in the world.
Yeah.
And then they go and do like have a couple sales meetings and realize it's not as easy as it's going to be, right? Or as I think it's going to be.
They don't just mail checks in? Are you kidding me?
I know, right? Shocking.
But the one thing I will say about that is, I ask everybody on the podcast, what's one thing that you had to learn that you didn't really understand before you got into business? And overwhelmingly, it's a financial literacy thing.
Yes.
Right? Overwhelmingly, the idea that you have to, it's not running your home checkbook. Like there's a whole different level of complexity when you're running a business. And then you start adding employees and inventory and now all of a sudden very quickly can spin out of control. And so, the advice is never save money on your lawyer or your accountant.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
That's good. So kind of looking back at your journey as an entrepreneur, you've been doing this for a long time. That's not your old comment, by the way. That's you're wise. You're much wiser now than you were at the beginning. What's the mindset shift that was most critical for your growth?
I mean, so I had a high school basketball coach who used to say, if it's to be, it's up to me. And my junior year of high school, I had heard that one too many times. We lost to our arch rival 100-47. And I walked in the locker room and I was not a good basketball player. I was a good football player. I played basketball much like a football player, but we walked in the locker room and at the end of the game, and I just took my uniform off and I handed it to him. And I said, here's the deal. If it's to be, it's up to me. I'm going skiing. We live near a ski hill. I'm going to go ski for the rest of this winter. You're going to get fired at the end of the season because you're terrible. I'm going to come back next year. We're going to come back and we're going to beat this team. And that all happened. So he got fired. I made the team. I started. We came back. We beat that team. And that's kind of the attitude that's helped me through my entire kind of adult life is I'm okay telling somebody it's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm okay dealing with the consequences of that. And that kind of just lets me do the things that I think are most important.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, when things go horribly wrong, I can't sit back and go, well, if the peso hadn't declined in value versus the dollar, I'd have made my goals.
Yeah.
Because I got 3 kids, a wife and dog. Nobody on this side of the balance sheet is looking at me going, oh yeah, well, I get it because the peso went down, right? They're just like, what do you mean you failed?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's just, if you can take the upside, you have to be responsible for the downside too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. I love the way you said that and talking about accountability, right? I think it's for salespeople, right? Let's turn that a little bit, right? A lot of them do the same thing. It's the economy. They're not the right customer. They're not whatever it is, right?
Yes.
Tell me about the conversation you have going into new businesses that you're working with around accountability.
So this is, the funny thing is people talk to us because they want sales training, but what they really need is leadership training.
Mm-hmm.
And leadership doesn't come, you can't stand over somebody and say, listen, you're either going to do this or I'm going to fire you.
Yeah.
Right? That's not how you build accountability. The first, although not most time consuming role of a leader is to recruit. And when I say recruit, what I'm meaning is the business has goals and the individual has goals. And the leader has to recruit that individual into seeing how their goals fit into the business's goals and why they're responsible for doing their job so that the business can also succeed. And so it's not as much, holding somebody accountable as it is recruiting them to share the vision of the business and understand how being part of a team is super important.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. And I love the leadership approach to that because you're right. It is, a good leader is going to help them have the right accountability and they're going to take their accountability from the accountability that the leader takes. Right.
Yes.
So it's kind of that idea of thought processes trickle down, what they call it the herd, but to your team. Right. So they take on the leader. So, I'm curious for you, and as in your business, you've obviously studied this a lot. You continue to keep yourself, aware of things that are happening. How do you do that after 20 years in the industry? How do you continue to stay sharp and stay forward thinking?
Well, I probably I know I read a minimum of 24 business books a year.
Mm.
I also have, multiple meetings every month with multiple clients. I'm working with 15 to 25 companies and I'm seeing them all the time. And so you're just kind of constantly on the lookout for what are they doing that's working? What are they doing that's not working? What do they need to start doing? What do they need to stop doing? What do I need to make sure that they never do again? And then there's what are other people that I work with doing that is effective and transferable?
Yeah. That's
I like the transferable part because it's not just
Yes.
effective and because it does have to be transferable to you. Can it work for you? And I think, there is I think a lot of people look and go, oh, it's working for Bill or Janet or whatever name you want to use, right? It works for them. It'll work for me. And that's not always the case.
Yeah. Well, so back to the 1/3 of my business, it's tech companies. The number one problem I see with investors is an investor does really well on one investment and then applies the same thesis and method to everything else they invest in.
Mm.
It's like, yes, I got it. That was good right over there. Worked really, really well. Does not apply to any of these situations. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So how do you personally define success today on that? Has that changed over time?
It really hasn't. I mean, one of the reasons that I wanted to be self-employed, I mean, one of the things that's driven me, since my son was born 27 years ago, was I wanted to be able to do the things that I wanted to do. And so a large part of my business has been driven by, I coached 40 some youth sports teams. I coached basketball and football and soccer and had a blast. And, it's great when you go down to visit your kids and they're in college and you walk around campus and you run into kids that you coached as, third graders and second graders, and they come up to talk to you because they had fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot of that. That's far more important to me than anything else. And so I think it's strategic coach that says there are, three freedoms: the freedom of relationships, the freedom of time, and the freedom of money. And I think that if you can have freedom in all three of those, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good advice.
Yeah. I had a leader who, counseled me in something similar at one point in time, when he was talking about a job promotion, right? You get more time, more responsibility, and more money, right? And if you can get 2 of the 3, you're doing pretty good. And if
Yeah.
you can get 3 of the 3, why aren't you signing on the dotted line yesterday?
Yeah, just go.
Right? Yeah. So, we're doing this right at the end of January, this interview right at the end of January. So I'm curious, like what, looking ahead, what's next for you and Sandler DTB? Any big goals that you're trying to do this year or, special things you're doing with the business?
Yeah. So we're part of with my youngest graduating from high school. The focus of my business has changed. We're going to grow the business a little bit more rapidly now. That's going to be a big focus for the next few years. I'm older, as Kelly likes to point out.
You're not going to live
Nothing
that
but
down.
love for you, Matt.
I guess. But you start to see different things that you can focus on, but the payoff is always in time, money, or relationships. And so, as I do this and as I grow the business, I'm simply looking to, what are the things that I can get for the time that I trade working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I really appreciate your perspective, Matt. I know we had, a first conversation. I was on your podcast, got a chance to talk to you on there. And then of course here, and you're just a wealth of knowledge and experience. I love that how you love your kids and your family and you really prioritize those relationships. Yes, you're, a badass at business and you have grown this company over the years, but a lot of it is a relationship for you. And I just really appreciate you sharing your perspective with our audience and listeners. Real quick, how do people get in contact with you? I will link your LinkedIn in the bottom here of the show. But share with everyone.
So Instagram, Sandler DTB Indy. Obviously you can find me on LinkedIn, Matt Nettleton. The other thing is pop over and listen. If you're a small business owner, pop over and listen to the Default Profitable podcast. I think we're at 160 some episodes now, and it's just business owners talking about what they've learned as they started their business. And it's just, 20-minute stories and, what have they figured out that they didn't think they needed to.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.